Welcome to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh Ritchie, and today I'm joined by Jason LANKOW, and our guest is Joshua Ariza, who is founder at Chomp Brand. Josh, thanks for joining us today. How's it going, man?
Hey, pretty good. Yeah, just a lovely Thursday out here. I'm going to be coaching my kids' soccer team tonight, so I was getting hyped on the drills I'm going to teach them.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. So you're the founder and owner at Chomp. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about your company and what makes it interesting?
I started Chomp almost 9 years ago. I had no intention of starting an apparel brand, but I have worked in apparel virtually my entire career, so I sort of understand the ins and outs of developing products, sourcing, getting things to retail, and all that. All sort of like the boring stuff that they would almost never teach you in school, I just picked up along the way. I'd worked for Billabong and Nike before that, and then the way it started was a friend who worked for Zoomies was like, "Hey, start a brand. I'll buy T-shirts from you." And his name's Armani. He's the sweetest guy, and he was probably the main guy who thought I had a chance at starting an apparel brand, and I basically just kept it afloat ever since then. It's mostly art-based T-shirts, but also art-based headwear and fleece and outerwear, and we do collaborations with brands of all types. We also do surfboards and skateboards, and really it's a robust product assortment. But really art-based. It's not influencer-based. It's not, athlete-based. We do sponsor athletes and some influencers, but really those people are not the focus of the brand. They're more the wearers of it, So it's all my art. There's a lot of audience engagement. I was really trying to start a mass market brand, but I think I ended up starting a cult brand at the same time. So a lot of people get the graphics tattooed on them. And I think it's been kind of it's truly like a really fun art project.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think we see some of your art behind you too, right? On the walls.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is merchandised perfectly to sell you guys products. So yeah, here I did a children's book. There's a couple toys on the bottom there, and I pretty much just make whatever I want. There's no one to tell me nothing.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you also have your own design studio. What kind of projects do you tend to work on through that studio?
I work on projects of all types. I do branding, apparel, commercial art. And it's really just anything that you can put graphics on, but I tend to specialize in more illustrative looking things. People who come to me, they come for illustration looking products. And so really just, I touch on all things, but I don't really do like websites, and I am working on a larger project for Uber right now. That's as far as I'll design in like apps and stuff. They really just need like an icon suite. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, super interesting. So you've been designing for a while, you said, and you're working on things with multiple brands. You're working on your own brand. Could you take us back to when you first realized you wanted to have a career in design, and like what happened? What kind of put you on this path?
Yeah, my older brother, he was a designer, and I kind of followed in his footsteps a bit. And graphic design became cool for a moment. It was like a lot about music and, record covers and all these other ways in which you could make art on your computer and it could be applied to things. And there was also a lot of really smart people in my life who were kind of helped govern my decision making and my ability to really forge a path in a career there. So my brother and then my parents, who were like very just supportive of me doing graphic arts and design and giving me as much mentorship as possible there. And then sort of failing forward, I really liked it, and then just happened to, and because I liked it so much, I would meet other people who were older who could give me advice. And I think that my career is marked by really smart people giving me really good advice. And, I don't come from a lot of money or anything, but the thing that I've been gifted in life was just people who cared about my development and were willing to give me like advice about what happens next. Teachers, I just found out my drawing teacher from high school is like one of the most influential people. He passed away, and like I had been trying to find him for years. Like I just found out he passed away like a month ago. His name's Timothy Tyler, and he taught me everything I know about drawing. And I wasn't even a top drawing student, to be honest with you. I was not a very good student in high school. wasn't a poor student, but 3.0, 3.3 kind of stuff. But I was in a magnet program, so everyone was really talented around me. So, but I just stuck with it. And then, yeah, like serendipitous like stuff happened. Like when I was in senior in high school, some guy who went to the same school as me, he was a creative director at Billabong. He called the school and was like, "Hey, do you have anybody you'd recommend for this job?" And then my teacher was like, "Hey, would you want to do this job?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome." And then I had that job. And so like it was, weird stuff like that has happened. But I was also really very willing to take opportunities that maybe more trepidatious people wouldn't take. So I moved my whole life to California when I was 22 from Florida. And I don't know, everyone wants to get out of Florida sometime. Like it was a good decision. So it's just been marked by a lot of luck and a lot of people who cared about me, but just kept my head down and kept drawing.
So you started out your career in design as a Florida man, and then now
yeah,
you're a California man.
I'm California's Florida man, and I rep it too. I almost wore a Florida shirt for this podcast.
Maybe next time.
Certainly should have. So you have. I love how you describe that. Like you don't have anyone telling you nothing on the what you do, and it's cool. You have a lot of ground for experimentation, and with a physical product and essentially studio clients, what's the challenge there for you in balancing those two modes of working, and what other challenges do you face as a business?
I wish I was good at balancing things. I was way better when my brand wasn't doing well at all because I just neglected it as much as possible and only kept it in the air. And now has a lot more prongs out there. So I'm managing an agency that does our email marketing and all the web dev stuff, and then I'm managing an agency that also does our ads and our digital ad sales and paid social. So. And then there's a 3PL, and there's an ops guy, and now there's manufacturers. So it is like prepping things, and hopefully you can oil the machine as much as you can. But there's still fire drills that pop up every now and then where I have to put out a fire. But I have about 5 projects that I'm working on simultaneously for various clients, and I try not to let the scope be too big so that I can't handle them. But I'm a short order cook type designer, so people aren't really using me for longer than a month at a time, with the exception of Uber, who's been using me for like the last 4 months. So very rare that I would be with a company that long. They must like me.
Usually everyone's getting rid of you after a month, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No.
they got the dish they wanted, and they're moving on.
No. So what are the skills you feel like you mentioned drawing in high school, and what other skills have helped you? And for someone who's an aspiring designer, illustrator, just starting out, what do you feel like they should really focus on honing, or even how should they think about finding the right skills to hone into?
The first thing no one really told me when I was young is that like illustration can be applied to like anything. Like anything can have an illustration on it. Your wallpaper can be an illustration. Your t-shirt can be an illustration. There can be decals on your car. There can be illustrations on top of furniture. There's textiles. There's repeating pattern prints. There's just so many ways in which illustration can be applied. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding sometimes from illustrators that there is a huge marketplace to be drawing for things, for bespoke art, for custom illustration, can really be anywhere. Maybe the uphill battle that they have is just understanding maybe the manufacturing process for each one of those things, but that can be learned over time. So I think a big mistake that younger designers make or younger illustrators might make is that they just don't understand that they can be drawing for everything. And just like I said, I have a book, I have a toy, I have posters, I have t-shirts, I have skateboards, I have surfboards. All those things can be cool, interesting, illustrated items. And so that would be the advice that I give to anyone younger. But I think like now my challenge is not so much can I make the thing, it's like can I sell the thing too? Like I worked like 6 weeks on this children's book, And I was like, and then we did cut a whole promo for it, pushed ads against it. We're doing merchandise for it, and I'm not that great at selling children's books yet. I'm really good at selling T-shirts to people from the ages of 18 to 35. I'm not so good at selling a children's book. So um, I'll sort that out over time. And I think like the main skill for me has been I'm good at Illustrator, but I am much better at understanding that there is a huge marketplace for illustration out there, and there's no shortage of like need for it really.
That's really cool. Do you feel like at the early stages of your career, it's like do you feel like it's better to like force yourself to specialize a bit more, or to take that expansive view and be super open to anything?
Yeah, I think I'm just by nature more open to anything, and always wanted to design for everything. I mean, how many people just listen to one type of music? I mean, there's no. So even when I was playing music, I still wanted to play all types of music, and I wanted to listen to all types of music. So I think that might just be in my nature. I'm sure there are people who are just like hardcore country fans or hardcore rap fans or whatever. But I think pragmatically, it's probably better to be interested in designing for all types of things. But of course, there is the opposite. There are the rare specialists who are just quite good at one thing. Illustration is tricky insofar as honing a style like that goes along with trends a little bit too much. So you just would need to evolve as much as you could over time so that you don't get, I don't know, limited by your own creativity or your own skill set. So yeah, in my view, I think broader is better.
Yeah. So, as someone that is responsible for managing their own time, and your time is very important to you, and you're probably looking to work through projects fairly quickly, but when you have the time to really like go into the weeds on something, where do you like to like spend that time? Is it maybe exploring type or colors? Like, what do you really just kind of nerd out on? Maybe is a better way of putting the question.
Yeah, I mean, I do like looking at stuff. It like hasn't gotten old. Like the people who I look up to in illustration are really like more masters of illustration. They're people who there was an era of time where poster art for movies was illustrated. There's an illustrator named Jack Davis who did a lot of Mad Magazine covers and stuff. And these people are like lifetime illustrators. So there's like people I look at who have just owned illustration their entire life. I think in the marketplace, I think what's interesting is like, how can I design for something? I really think I kind of nerd out. Like you could play this little game where you go to Alibaba and you look at, which is basically just a hub for sourcing all types of manufacturing. And you can look down a list of things that people are making worldwide. They'll give you a list of like the pricing and, minimum order quantities. But you can look through it and go, can I design for this? Like, could I make a bag? Could I make a stuffed animal or, plush? Or could I design bed sheets or something? And there's like just a huge list of products that are getting manufactured everywhere where you can design for those things. And I'm kind of more interested right now in my career is figuring out like how I can continue to broaden my like product assortment on the e-commerce so that it just feels like a full brand. What would it be like if Chomp did, I don't know, a car wrap? What if Chomp did motorcycle graphics? What if Chomp did plush? And that is kind of like a fun experience that I'm kind of always looking at. So in my like personal interest, I like the masters who are really good at illustration. I mean, House Industries or something like that, who's just like spent a lifetime being a master at something. That's really cool.
Yeah. What's it like switching off between Chomp and client work? Is it really hard to manage everything? And are there ways in which working on the two separate things kind of benefit the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's gotten way harder, because there are fire drills, an email goes out with the wrong link, or one time someone put we were offering free t-shirts on like a t-shirt blank that I really didn't like so much, so I just honestly wanted to give them away, and we offered like our best customers like a free shirt, and someone didn't put a cap on how many you could order, so someone ordered like 40.
Wow.
For just the cost of shipping, and stuff like that happens all the time. So it is tough to manage, but yeah, I'm shocked at how much people come to me wanting the look and content of Chomp in with their brand in mind. So it has been a lot more osmosis than I expected. And then it's also nice to just have like freedom from client work with no restrictions there. Of course, there are monetary downsides that can make a product that no one wants, and I paid for it already. I can totally blow it on the side of designing products for the marketplace, but I'm not really limited by creativity there. On the client side too, it's just nice to be grounded in something that has to sell for somebody else and solving their problem too. On the UI side or UX side, just designing icon assets that everyone can read and understand, or on the client side, like I'm designing stuff for Shark Week for sunglasses, and it's a much broader marketplace. So, yeah, and they wanted the Chomp look. To be honest, they like saw that stuff, and that's how they came to me. I draw
That's
a lot
cool.
of sharks.
Yeah, it's almost like your Chomp brand is kind of like a secondary portfolio for your
100%.
work,
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So the title of our podcast is Best Story Wins, and that's rooted in our belief that story is how a company can differentiate, and ultimately it's how they can strike a competitive advantage and then win the hearts and minds of their customers relative to the companies they're competing with. So curious to hear how you'd explain what the brand story is for Chomp and how you've heard it resonate with your customers. Like, what are some of the kind of pieces of feedback that you've heard over the years?
Yeah, I would even, we never really use the term story, although like we could, but I almost had there were more ethos, like it was in the DNA of the brand. And the DNA of the brand was like going to be unserious. It was going to be illustrated. It was going to be tongue in cheek. And there were boundaries to those things. And then who are the retailers? So like we were selling in Zoomies. So we have Zoomies as an account. We have a handful of other accounts. And so it was one part understanding what the customer would want, one part being totally unserious, one part being illustrated. And then we have like demographics. The story we were trying to sell was that these were illustrated conversation pieces that would like make you laugh. That one of the signature problems with running an apparel brand like mine is that no one knows you. So people have to relate to the product right away. And some brands are better at doing that, and some brands are quite the literal opposite. They let they let Michael Jordan sell their product, and that's why you like the product. And it's still a good product, but he's the salesperson, he's the pitch. And with my stuff, it's like they're never going to get to meet me, and they shouldn't, because I'm not very tall. I'm not particularly buff. I'm not really a great leader. So the story was really in the product itself, and it was trying to get you to relate to it right away. And then we have boundaries for like the type of content that we would riff on. So we like beach content, we like surf content, we like streetwear content, we like jokes, we like middle fingers. And there's a small, it's a smallish window of things that we design into. I think story is a thing that you iron out over time too. You make what you think will work, and then sometimes your consumer just decides what's working for you, right? It's like how you end up with like the one-hit wonders, like on the fair circuit, where like there's some guy singing the "I'll be your crying shoulder," and he's like, I've made like 5 other albums since then, and people are like, play the one song, play it. He has to like open and close with the song. So there's some tug and pull with like your audience deciding what your story is, and you kind of trying to fight against that. Story for me is just their boundaries. It's an ethos, and for us, it really is an aesthetic. The story we're trying to sell is an aesthetic.
When you're developing visual identity for a client, do you feel like you have a pretty tried and true framework or philosophy that you use for, kind of understanding their brand's foundation, and what do you kind of anchor your concepts to, and how do you think about
Yeah, I
the
mean,
overall philosophy of that?
it starts with art direction. I think that's the primary thing. And I'm dealing mostly in aesthetics. So people just want the images, they want the icons, they want those kinds that go along with it. So we're starting with the the art direction, and then also sort of like a competitive landscape. What are other people doing in the space? Let's look at them. Is that helpful? Are those things to avoid, or are those things to sort of assimilate to? You know, you wouldn't make a banking website look super duper silly because people are tying up their millions of dollars like in assets up with that company. So there's some regalness that needs to go along. Is that a word? Regalness?
Sure.
There's some,
We'll allow it.
there's some factors that you need to consider when designing for really anything. I don't really know of too many very silly footwear brands besides maybe Crocs or something or something that's for like a younger consumer. So there's a tone of voice along with the aesthetics. So I always start with art direction, mood boards, people looking at images. What do we like? What do we dislike? And then just trusting that will lead us to kind of a good solution. There are trends. They're like macro trends that sometimes you want to totally avoid, and you can see them happening with tech companies where they all start to assimilate to the same look, and you don't know if that's like a convention that you should design to because it will help people relate you to that industry, or if you should totally avoid it because you will never be able to stand out by looking like them, and you're trying to thread that needle. I think people have very strong opinions about that, and on both sides of that spectrum. But for me, I'm just trying to make something cool that we can also trademark.
Yeah. Speaking of trends, one of the things that we're hearing from kind of every angle right now is this idea that the economy is in flux, right? People are claiming we're either in a recession or we're heading towards recession. I think we can all agree that the economy is in flux and we don't know where it's going. But what is that kind of shift in the macro? What does that mean for us brand people and for brands like Chomp?
I've always kept my team very lean. Everyone who works for me is a contractor. They work on multiple brands. One of the things that I have that works for me is that I can make something anytime I want very quickly. And the trade-off there is that I miss out on maybe some client work or worse, I miss out on, more time with my kids or something like that. But it is effectively free labor. So that's why Chomp can exist. Is pragmatically, I'm a person who can just make things and at a low cost. So we only, my MOQs for printing a t-shirt might only be 72 units. Look, I made a t-shirt, 72 units really doesn't cost me that much money, whatever that is times 10 or something, and so in that instance, keeping overhead low and having free labor effectively myself as a designer, then that gets a lot of things rolling. And so I could effectively, if my sales were way down, the output of the product doesn't necessarily need to slow to a drip. I can still make as many things as I want. I can still keep an engaged audience. I can still sell to a core audience. It's not an issue. Just my minimum order quantities go way down. In the instance of creative services, like where, hired gun, work for hire, I'm still only really one person, and so there's that. And just the truth is, I don't really like managing people. I like hiring the most amount of experts possible and paying them the max amount of money so that I don't have to manage them. And frankly, I'm also not good at their job either. I'm not good at digital ad sales. So I've always kept my overhead low in the design services too. So it's really just me. It's this office and people rent space for me. And so, I'm just, I'm built for the end of the world. The first 2 quarters of this year, they were not good. And so there was nobody looking to hire anybody. And I think creative services consolidated as much as it really could, and all the free money that was floating around just totally evaporated. And all the risk tolerance that people had before is like now slowed to a drip.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I knew what I knew now in retrospect, I would have just kicked off some brand, raised money on it, and released some product. You know, it could have just been anything, but there's downsides to that too. You know, I'm sure there's some people right now who were operating off of funding that can't find any. So it's a very interesting time, and I'm frankly just a snail. You know, I've been scaling my brand over the last 9 years, and you know, we have sold, you know, over 1 million T-shirts since then, but the growth looked like this. You know, it was not this like right away. You know, and nobody wanted it for a long time. So, yeah.
Huh. Do you, when you think about, and I know this, to your point earlier about, you know, the agencies you find that just can handle these things for you. So I don't know what extent you're involved in, say, like your paid campaigns, but how much do you take like a kind of test and learn or like experimental approach to your paid media spend?
Yeah, as much as possible. Test. Like when you think you figured it out, continue to test.
So walk us through what that looks like, say for, are you mostly doing that for the T-shirt sales?
Yeah, so we sell everything, but the thing that sells the most is T-shirts. And part of that is because T-shirts are mostly unisex, but men tend to wear headwear more. And hoodies are also sort of unisex. We test everything. So we would test a video, we'd test stills, but we'd also test the product by itself, and then we'd test the product on a model. We test different, different types of offers. So you could have an offer that's 2 for 1, or an offer that's 25% off, or one T-shirt sells a ton, but and we want to get an offer. We want another T-shirt to go along with it. We have a buy one get one half off. You know, so we're just trying different offers with different images, with different models, with different product assortments, and even video. You know, our best performing ad click through was also our worst selling T-shirt. So it just turned out that people really liked the video and they thought it was cool, but they didn't care to purchase the product. And that opposite happens. You know, there are some that people are not clicking through as often, but they will buy it every time they click through. You know, there's really funny things that happen along the way. So right now we're testing a ton of lifestyle stuff, and it's actually still not performing as good as our best selling, just a lay flat T-shirt with an illustration on it. So that kind of speaks to the nature of like Chomp in general, which is that the storytelling is always in the graphics, and that's why people are buying it. They're not buying it because like a hot dude or hot girl is wearing it. They're not doing it because someone with tattoos was wearing it. They're literally buying it because they like the graphic. And so it's a fascinating problem I've created.
So does that feedback that you're getting from your ads, does that inform like the size of the orders that you're placing, and does it also impact how you develop future products?
Yeah, a fascinating thing with all retail and wholesale stuff is that there's a gatekeeper, which is the buyer. So the buyer is the person who just decides what's going to show up on the assortment. Now they can take advice from me, the maker, or the salespeople who sell it to them, but ultimately they still make their decisions. They have their own biases. We saw purple selling really well this last month, so we want something purple from you. And you might say, hey, my brand really does black well, but they might say, we don't care, we want purple. And so there's a gatekeeping apparatus, but then you immediately get feedback once things start to sell. And so then that will inform a lot more of their buying on what works for your brand. Yes, the customer decides, but there's a hazard of the selling process, which is you're not selling when you're selling through a wholesaler, you're selling through a gatekeeper, and they might be a great gatekeeper, you know, or they might be a really bad one who doesn't want to let any of your best selling stuff in there, and they only want the weird stuff, and that happens. E-commerce is really interesting because it is effectively, we're testing ads against almost every single product that we have. And so then we have a good litmus test. Now, products that sell really well over e-commerce are are not one-to-one products that people might purchase off the shelf somewhere. They're not always the exact same. And for example, our best-selling shirt is not a T-shirt that our best-selling e-commerce shirt is not a T-shirt we've ever been able to get a buyer to buy. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I can tell them like, this is our best-selling shirt, has been for the last like year, and they don't pick it up or really even care. And part of that is also too because it doesn't merchandise well. It doesn't merchandise well like when it's folded, or it doesn't hang well, or you know what I'm saying. So there's hazards from all sides, and we just continue to test stuff as much as possible.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It reminds me of a conversation that you and I had a while ago about Huff and the streetwear / skate brand, and you were telling me that their sock with the weed all over print constitutes like 80% or 90% of their total sales. Have you found a product like that for Chomp that just kind of blows everything else out of the water? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, the Huff story is like one that's kind of like lore. It's been floating around. I think I heard that it was 60% of their revenues, but don't quote me on any of that because it's just the story gets handed all around. So maybe it represents none of it, but I think that tends to be true for a lot of brands, that they have one SKU that sells a lot more than others. We have like 3, and that's great. And that also isn't the nature of like the one-hit wonder. People want to hear, I'll be your crying soda, like over and over again. You're like, we're trying to make new hits, but you guys just won't fucking listen. So we have like 3 shirts, and frankly, I'm just too moral that I just like, if something's sold awesome and I start to hate it, I just don't reorder it, and I don't let myself do it. I have my family to feed, and I have my contractors to pay, but we don't have a lot of people to pay. So it's kind of one of those things. I have a very moral, pragmatic stance that like once the stuff starts to get old and lifeless, you don't want to be like hanging on to it too long. My office mate calls, I don't know if he's the one who came up with it, but my office mate calls it short cons or long con. Do you have a short con where you just get your money and get it out as fast as possible? Or do you have a long con where you're just like, you're in the business? The con is just to be cheeky, but like the concept is I'm trying to build a brand with a lot of IP, with a lot of contact points, with a lot of products. And it's not smart long-term strategy for me to be all in on one product or all in on one idea. And it's like, I have seen brands that there is some t-shirt from them that's the only t-shirt I see, and they might make other products, but I'm not seeing it, and that's okay. They're probably very stoked to be selling that one item, but and we have one like that actually. I think that sold really, really good at retail. It's called the Sunset Undead, and I get text messages about this shirt showing up pretty much everywhere. So we kind of have it a little bit on the wholesale side, but not on the e-commerce side.
Got it. And you were talking earlier about kind of one of your competitive advantages, which is your leanness and the fact that you can be nimble and kind of do what you want and you don't have this big overhead. What would you say brands should be doing maybe differently or maybe less of versus more of in the current economic climate? And can you please include in your answer the Goo Goo Doll song that you sang twice already?
It's not Goo Goo Dolls. I don't even know his name. He's a one-hit wonder.
It's Goo Goo Dolls, no?
No,
Aerosmith.
No.
Is it?
We have to look it up. I'll be...
It's Ed McCain?
Oh, God. Oh,
exactly, dude.
Please edit this out. This is embarrassing.
No. Hold on. Here's what you need to look at. What is his most popular song, which is for sure that one, and then his second most popular song, and what's the play rate? Like, it's probably like 1 billion, and the next one is like 200,000. And he probably is a really great songwriter, but the radio didn't let him tell us. So, your question was, what could brands be doing to?
Well, what should they be doing more of? What should they be doing more of or less of? Just kind of given where things are at with the economy.
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't think I'm not qualified to give financial advice, except I would say here's what's worked for me, which is there are people who raise money and they take a lot of capital and they take a lot of debt, and I think those things are fine when money's free flowing and your investors are happy to see you take risks, but eventually the bill comes due. And um, that is the nature of cheap money. That is the nature of fast. Don't slam that door. Of course. That is the nature of cheap money. That's the nature of like the fast sort of startup way. What I've had to do from the beginning is always balance a budget. You know, I can't spend more than I make, and I just can't. And frankly, no one wants to invest in an apparel brand. Well, I mean, virtually no one, unless you show a proof of concept. I could go expand my line of credit, which is a bit cheaper than maybe say credit cards. But I think people take, in general, I think a hazard is that people took a lot of money or they took a lot of debt and didn't have to balance the budget like early on. Look, I created a children's book that took me 6 weeks to make. So there's 6 weeks sort of opportunity cost where I'm not billing for that time or working on products that I know would sell really well. And then I created a promo that also cost me a few extra $1,000. So, you know, the net dump into this project, we're talking like $30,000. And I think we've sold $3,000 worth of books. So I make bad bets too, but my bad bets are in my time, you know? And so also don't tell my wife that I did that. And if you could, just do not share this podcast with her. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's just about balance. It's just dollars and cents. The money comes in, you don't spend more than you have. And I think it probably gets tricky for you guys on the agency side, which is like you're gaming out like your whole year. You know, you might be on contract for a whole year for somebody, and you don't really even know if they're going to renew that contract next year. And so that is like, you know, your butthole puckers quite a bit when that time starts to come up and like, are they going to give us another $1 million? Or, you know, who knows? And I'm just the short order cook who just like one in, one out. So I've been playing craps my whole career.
Okay, so just to give you a little plug here, this book that you've referred to, I had to look it up, but it's Beach Party Bunny.
I love hearing you say it in that voice.
You want to test an ad with me as your voiceover for the book?
We did do VO. We did an animation for it, and it's about a bunny who has to get to the beach party, and he's running late. So it's a kind of a sing-songy book. It's a nighttime bed story. It doesn't take longer than 5 minutes to read, and So you were talking about brand boundaries or the story. Like it fits neatly within the Chomp story. We have the heavy illustration, the 2-color illustration. We have the predator prey aspect, so like the never worried stuff comes into play. It's very beachy, and we are very beachy. We're always near the coast. It's there's a skateboarding character, so it just fits really neatly within the world. Actually, building those boundaries made it easier to really write. I wrote the book in about an hour and a half, and then it took 6 weeks to illustrate. So I wish I was a writer, I think, is what we're deciding. Better to be a writer.
Yeah, well, when you are looking to load it onto Audible and you need a person to read it, I think Jason's your man.
Jason, you got a deep, bellowy voice. You're a baritone, dude.
Yeah, I think I've been called a beach party bunny in the past. So Josh, you're Josh Ariza. You're a little bit of a I should rewind that. Not a little bit. You are kind of a bona fide thought lord on Twitter. And I know, certainly the more I've interacted with you, the algorithm has just brought you front and center, whatever you're thinking at any moment, every time I
I'm sorry, dude.
open up X. So, but I think you've struck an interesting balance on AI where you're not like I know you like making fun of things and, especially like in the early days of Dolly and so forth, I was kind of ripe for the picking. But I'm curious how your thinking on this is evolving. And, obviously for any of us in any creative service, there's kind of a double-edged sword here, like opportunity and threat with AI. And I think, some people have resisted even using tools or learning tools in the AI space because it's just like, why would I embrace my own like Grim Reaper here? But I'm curious, I've shared with you before a bit of this, like, because I've done a lot with different AI art tools, you know, kind of going back to like Google Colab notebooks and things. It's gotten a lot easier. But I've always thought, like, if I was an illustrator designer myself and could feed my own, you know, original thoughts visually into this as like reference images, I could do something that felt a lot more like ownable. You know, like I don't really share the stuff I make because it's always this question mark in the back of my head, like, am I really making this? Or like, at what point could I say this thing is actually original? Whereas like, I see a designer, illustrator, you could really legitimately, and you know, a lot of the top AI artists do this, right? They're taking their own work and then manipulating it with AI and, you know, generative code. So I'm just curious how your own thinking on this is, you know, probably not necessarily even in the context of your brand, but perhaps in the context of your brand, but just from a artist standpoint, do you see the like general illustrator community or yourself even kind of opening up and seeing ways to integrate generative AI into your own like original art workflow?
I have not really seen too many illustrators use it that often, but I have seen a lot of designers who just like kind of freeform ideas on there, and it's just like fun for them to kick back and, you know, throw some prompts at it and see what it kicks back at them, and then refine those things, and that's pretty interesting to me. I don't think I have any bones about it. There are some legal hazards that have been kind of interesting to watch unfold. You know, you cannot trademark an image made by AI, apparently. You know, and that was an interesting little decision that happened. And so that sort of was a blunt object, I think, for using it for logos or something like that. Right out the gate, I did see some friend of mine, Alex Rinker, who, you know, I think literally like the day Midjourney dropped or something like that, he was creating very interesting, unique designs, not even really illustrations, like designs, like logos. And he was prompting it as well as I've seen anyone do. And I think what is interesting about that is it kind of makes it almost like low skill labor or something like that. You know, it took me longer to train on the phones at Pizza Hut than it did for this guy to create really interesting things out of AI. What that will do over the long term is in sort of like the commodification of design and illustration. I don't have any big bets about that. I think I had some short term bets that seem to have really panned out. I think stock images or stock design might get totally smashed, and I think that really seems to have happened. I think editorial illustration was kind of next to be taken, and I have seen some people on Substack using it quite a bit. You know, freelance writers and stuff where they don't have an illustrator on staff or want to use an illustrator or are qualified to direct an illustrator. You know, so I have seen things like that happen. In terms of positives or negatives about it, I think that decision about not being able to trademark an image did do something to my brain where it was like, okay, a little bit less of an existential threat, but even kind of less real world utility to it or something like that. And that is fascinating. And then on the OpenAI side, I mean, you didn't ask me about ChatGPT, but I had used it quite a bit, trying to get it to help me with my book, and really, it did not help me at all. I would try to get it to scan for grammar issues, and then it would just kept adding the word and so, from just a learning about the world situation, there's been times where I'm like, oh, I want to know what are the Federalist Papers about, or like what happened in World War I, what kicked it off, stuff like that. It's been pretty helpful. Now I don't know how to fact check it or anything like that, but I don't see it as much as an existential threat anymore, insofar as like illustration was already kind of commodified, I guess. Is that the word? It's like it's ubiquitous, and mostly nerds like me really care about it, and I think people who read graphic novels care about it, and people who read comic books care about it. But it doesn't scare me anymore. But I think it can be a tool for some people. I'm a tool, by the way. People call me a tool. I don't know. That was kind of a long-winded answer to say that I'm neither for or against it, but utility is not panned out. And also, I think just the amount of stuff that's getting given to it or fed to it, it creates a very AI sort of vibe to it. I was shocked to see that it seemed to have such a decisive point of view early on. And, I tried to get Midjourney to do a lot of woodblock looking illustration. I could not get it to move in that direction whatsoever. Now I'm a novice at using Midjourney, but, if I spent 5 hours doing it, how much better it would be. I literally spent 10 minutes doing it. I was like, I don't think I'm...
Shocking you didn't become an expert. Prompt master.
Prompt daddy, I heard it called. That was Dan Casaro, I think. Yeah, it was a long-winded answer as far as doesn't scare me. I'm not for or against it, but it's moved as far as I think it's going to move for a bit. I think someone did send me a trailer for something that was really cool, looking like a phony-looking movie. That was cool. They could produce it, so maybe it has some art direction utility, in terms of creating CGI or animation or something outside.
Oh yeah. It's just moments away, I think, from being pretty indistinguishable.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about it?
Oh, I think the ones you saw probably came out of Runway, which is doing a lot of interesting things with video. And, I think there's I kind of check myself anytime I see something and I'm like, oh, yeah, I think that's almost our way of making ourselves feel better for it's not perfect yet. It was really obvious when, the hands were showing up with 8 fingers and stuff, but
yeah.
But
I think
that's already,
images...
that's perfected for the most part. And that one's funny too, because when you actually look at people's hands, you realize hands almost always look weird, so whatever, if you got an image out of AI and it looked like Josh's hand looks right now, you'd be like, wait, hands don't look like that, just no offense, Josh. I mean, my hand too,
Yeah, it's very good at making photorealistic looking stuff. Well, I think those trailers and things that I see pop up, I actually do think there was a fair amount of very hard work put into those things. They were not just prompts, they went through multiple layers of refinement and editing. So I would see that seems like real work to me. I don't know. It doesn't seem it's not as hey, Kermit in the Matrix, it's not as simple as that. But I'm a total novice to it, but it seemed like legit hard work to make that.
I think that's one of the where you see a lot of the best work coming right now is just working it into your workflow like any other tool. If you're writing, using it to help you get a running start and structure something, but then bringing your own thoughts and editing and then maybe feeding it back and saying to add something different or make it 10% less cheesy. Same with, on the visual side. I think some of our team did something recently for a blog template, or it was I really wanted to present AI generated images in an interesting way. And, there's a lot of talk about watermarking this for watermarking AI so that it can be detected. We're okay, let's just get ahead of that. And not as a scarlet letter, shamefully saying warning, this is an AI image here, but just actually using good design to say generated in Midjourney or something like that, just tagging it yourself, not in a text caption below it, but actually in your brand system, kind of integrating your own way also of distinguishing. One of our designers brought this up, hey, we have a lot of original design on this site. Let's call out the stuff 100%. That's AI generated, not in a shameful way, but just to clearly distinguish it from the stuff we've made as original work, Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't even know that you guys had AI images on there.
Just in blog posts, but kind of a template though, where it's the image is embedded in a layout that's designed in the brand system. So it's
I don't think anyone should care about how. There's some ethical question here about how inspiration helps create images, even through illustrators. It's every illustrator knows they don't work without inspiration.
Yeah.
I mean, even looking at other illustrators, I'm telling you, I look at the masters. I look at Jack Davis's work and go, I wish I could make that. Now, I never can make it. not only because I'm not as good at drawing. I mean, I might at some point be as good at drawing, but I still will never be able to exactly replicate it. In the same way, if I played a cover song of someone else, I'll never sound exactly like them, But I think it's too disingenuous sometimes, I think, of illustrators to assume that even their own work is wholly creative. There's many times where I've caught someone's reference and like, oh, that actually looks pretty similar, or it's similar to a thing that I really like, so, not to dog on illustrators, but I don't think it's necessarily an ethical question if you're doing like a blog post. I already know people are using it for Substack stuff. I don't think really anyone cares.
It's kind of like what I'm hearing you say here makes me think, at least, that it's more of like a new tool that people are using to do kind of the same old things, right? Like there's that saying that good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I should probably be more principled, and maybe some illustrators would come at me for not being like, oh, it steals it. It definitely does use people's input without them asking, no question,
Yeah.
What are those people even using it for? Now, yeah, if you're using somebody's name and then you're like publishing a graphic novel using prompts using some illustrator's name, I don't know if it's unethical, but it creeps me the fuck out. I don't know. It's really strange. I don't like it, but using a blog post using your own illustration like that to me seems perfectly within the bounds of ethical behavior.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's some work to be done in reaching a consensus by the thought leaders and thought lords on kind of what constitutes ethical behavior, right, with AI and how to leverage it properly. I know we're right at time right now, Josh. This has been a super fun conversation so far. Before we break, are there any like tips or shout outs that you want to make, or any plugs that you want to make before we drop off?
When does this get released? Do you know?
Probably in a couple months.
Oh, okay. Well, then hopefully I'm still alive, and you guys should follow the brand. We do this.
Message from the other side.
Me talking to my future self, like, hey, buddy, I hope you're doing good. I think follow Chomp Brand. Either go to chompbrand.com or go to the Instagram and play along with some of the give me 2 emoji illustrations. We do these we'll call it illustration improv, where people give me suggestions and I draw their illustration and I make it into a t-shirt. The investment from the users is like you just literally type in 2 emojis. There's not a lot of effort on their side. So if you want to play in that game, that's cool. I think I would just plug Chomp Brand.
Cool.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And then just to clarify too on where to follow you, Instagram, Twitter, you have a big presence on both platforms. People can follow chompbrand.com, I think, on both, right? And then
Chomp Brand on both, and then Joshua _Ariza on all platforms.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Column 5's Best Story Wins is for marketing and branding professionals looking to unlock their growth potential. Each episode features a conversation with industry leaders about how they win the hearts and minds of their customers and build world-class brands. You'll learn about their success stories and their failures, as well as ideas for how to take your own marketing efforts to the next level. Welcome to Best Story Wins.